We're going to go through today. It's an educational webinar, seminar, 3 simple steps business owner must take to prepare for new cyber insurance requirements, and maybe 1 tip you probably never thought of. So we're going to go into that in detail. So please be prepared, have a pen and pencil ready. We are going to make it as educational as possible. This is what this is all about. So before I get started, really, who am I and why the heck do you care what I have to say? Well, I bought lunch. So what else is there? But besides that, 25 years of IT experience. I have a bachelor's degree in electronic engineering. I'm a HIPAA consultant and auditor, many certifications when it comes to technical certification, and an IT security consultant as well. Spend a lot of time in IT. That's what that's my passion. Cybersecurity has been a focus of ours for the last 2 to 3 years. I've been spending a lot of time learning. So that's why you should listen to me. As a matter of fact, I also wrote the book about it. So I have a couple of publications that you guys should have. One is Cybersecurity Essentials for Business Owners, and the other one's my first one, which was Computers Should Just Work, and our philosophies around it. So that's why you should listen to me, and I hope you guys take this as seriously as we do. So let's get started. What is going on? Did you guys know that cyber insurance companies are losing money? They are, and they're tired of it. Everybody started with cyber insurance, and in the beginning, and I'm talking only 3-4 years ago, all you needed to know is the number of employees, and hey, you got a policy, and you got a policy, and you got a policy. But then significant losses started to happen, and well, you know, insurance companies don't like to lose money. So why are they losing money? Well, number one, ransomware risk is increasing. So we know that that's one big piece. It's not only about ransomware though, but the rising cost of taking care of the issues if something does happen becomes a lot higher as well. Replacement cost, if you need to replace any of the equipment that got damaged, is also increasing. And people just don't have cybersecurity hygiene. They don't know what to do. Well, most people that we hear about, well, I got a firewall, or I'm protected, but there's all kinds of stuff that you could do to protect yourself, and we're going to talk about them today. Lack of incident response. What are you going to do if something does happen? Are you going to just hope for the best and not worry about it? But if you're prepared and you have a response plan, if something does happen, you know exactly how to proceed. And most importantly, business interruption, right? If you can't work, you can't earn. If you can't earn, what's the point? The idea is to be as prepared as possible. So I talked about ransomware risk is increasing. The average ransomware payment in 2020 was 300 grand. Now they go after larger companies, and there's some smaller ones, but the average overall was 300,000. That moved up in 2022. It became 925,161. We got this information from Forbes. So that's the number they threw out there. That's a big number for people to pay ransom. I mean, look at what happened at ECMC. They ended up paying, 15 million so far. The ransom at first was 40 grand. They should have paid that, but they didn't. So it's not just ransomware. Let's face it. It's also high-end, what do we call a BIC risk, a business email compromise risk. I'm sure you guys heard of this before or experienced it. Somebody sent an email from your CEO, say, I need you to run and get me some Google Play cards or Amazon cards and give me the information right away. And they give you that sense of urgency, that sense of, I better do something. The CEO is asking me personally as soon as possible. And most people don't fall for it, but you'd be surprised how many do. And it's called man-in-the-middle attack. What they do is they look for emails that has an invoice or a demand for payment, and they then modify and change a couple little things to trick you to think that you're doing the right thing. And you end up sending money to the wrong person in the wrong bank account, and there's nothing you could do about it anymore. So that's something to be aware of. Business email compromise. In 2021, 65% of organizations suffered a big issue. In 2022, that number went up to 77%. As a matter of fact, the FBI said that the amount of money lost from business email compromise scams continue to grow every year, with a 65% increase from 2020 to 2022. 65%, it keeps going up. And this number doesn't stop. Hackers are working on it. AI is working on it. Bots are working on it. We're under attack. This is what World War III will be about. It's going to be a cyber war. And we need to make sure that we win that war. So risk is increasing. At the end of the day, if you look at this chart, from impact to likelihood, we're really at the likely to occur and severe adverse effect will happen to your company because a strong hack will cripple your environment. So rising response costs. The costs associated with responding to a cyber incident are rising. Also, the major increase in costs in security, IT forensics, and legal experts after the fact. That price keeps going up because there's a lot more to do. Because sometimes we go into an environment and they don't have the basics and they got hacked. So they ask us, what happened? The list is long. Anything could have happened. We don't have a tool to be able to tell you what happened. And the right tools are important in the environment. And then increasing replacement costs. 44% of businesses plan to increase their tech budget, up from 6% last year. People are starting to realize the importance of good IT and cybersecurity, and they're investing more. 1 in 4 businesses increased their IT spend in 2022 due to a recent security incident. So you don't want to be the person waiting to get a security issue before you do something about it, right? Let's prepare. And inadequate cybersecurity hygiene. Most events are preventable. If you do some things, hackers are lazy. And what they mostly do is they wait for maybe patches and patches to be released by Microsoft or Adobe. And now they have a way to look at, if you did not put this patch, this is how I'm going to be able to use that vulnerability to gain access to your network. So patch management, cybersecurity hygiene in general is important. So with remote users, especially the lack of adequate cybersecurity controls, people that want to work from home, well, you're inviting their entire network to be part of your environment. Well, you got to not only secure their machine, but whatever else they have. Their kids have a laptop, their significant other brought something with them. They're on Xboxes and PlayStations. You have all kinds of traffic that now has access to your network. You got to make sure that there is a door there, that it's not just wide open. So preventable events, that's really what it's all about. If you have good cybersecurity hygiene, lack of incident response plan when something does happen. It's a plan that identifies the steps that a business needs to take. So if they get hacked, only 23% of businesses that we surveyed reported having an incident response plan. And they understand it. That means 77% of businesses have an inconsistent or no plan at all. Some people say, hey, I have a plan. I'm just going to call, Joe. I told you it's going to splash.
I'll call Ray.
And you'll call Ray. But that's what happens in reality. Somebody he's got it handled. Well, let's make sure of that. And then business interruption, the costs associated with cyber intrusion are not just related to responses and what we're going to do to get you whole again. You're not working. So according to a recent cyber claim study, claim impacting small and medium-sized enterprises, businesses result in an average of $343,000 in business interruption expenses. And this study came from Net Diligence Cyber Claim Study in 2020. Man, that's a lot, right? So if you're an insurance company, and we have some people here, what would you do? I mean, you're losing money. You're not going to sell the insurance the same way you were selling it before. Well, renewals are getting denied. Not only are they getting denied by tightened underwriting standards, premiums are on the rise, and standalone coverage increased by 92% in 2022. Prices are going up, and you guys know that. Some of you are in the insurance business and see it every day. But as a business owner, what can you do? Well, grab something to write. So I'm going to give you some knowledge and make sure that you guys are up to snuff and understand some of the things that are important here. So I talked about 3 steps. Number 1, make sure you're covered with an insurance policy. Number two, prepare to get or renew your policy. So you got to prepare before you go to an insurance company and say, hey, I'm ready. I want cyber insurance. Well, they're going to ask you to prove some stuff. Like I said, they're losing money. They want to make sure they do their job as well. And avoid becoming a victim. And I'm going to talk about those three. So let's get started. Make sure you're covered. So why you need a cybersecurity policy? Well, we talked about it. Ransomware is increasing. Risk of rising response cost, replacement cost, cybersecurity hygiene, incident response plan, business interruption. That's why you need a policy, so that you have something to fall back on if something fails. Cybersecurity insurance. So simple. Transfer the risk to an insurance company, right? I mean, that's the idea here. Well, it's not that simple. This is not covered for your normal business interruption insurance. You need a cyber insurance policy by itself, not just regular business insurance. It's not going to cover interruptions that way. And we do here, I don't need security insurance. I'm too small. I've never seen a small business in the news. You know, have you guys heard about a small little accounting firm? I'll talk to you guys about this. Small little accounting firm. A couple of years ago, our security team helped a small accounting firm that actually had a problem. I would call them even a micro firm, because there was only 8 people in that company. 8 people with cloud-based security software, cloud-based tech software. Think about this. They have nothing in the network. The network is just PCs, a switch, a firewall, and that's it. That's all they got. So they're like, well, we don't need much. We don't have much. Well, they got hacked. Not only did they get hacked, but they were able, through one of the machines, get access to their tax software and put 180 fraudulent tax returns within their software, and then push that out to the IRS so that it can get refunds. Well, the IRS caught it and then stopped that company from being able to do any e-filing altogether. Think about it. A small CPA firm can't do e-filing. I mean, are you in business still? Because I know I would have to ask, what do you mean you can't do e-filing? What happened? True story. So attackers don't care how big or small you are. You could have 2 computers. All businesses are at risk. Small business, big business, businesses in the cloud, all business get hacked, period. Everyone needs some type of cybersecurity insurance. So make sure you have a policy. That's important. So we talked about make sure you're covered and why. So now let's talk about prepare to get and renew your policy. Insurance company hate paying ransom. I'm telling you they do. They hate paying anything, really. You really have to prove that you hit within a specific amount of feedback, because you know what happens when you try to get a policy is that you have to fill out some information and you have to say, I have these kind of protections. They're asking you these questions now. And if they come back after you got hacked and they see you don't have one of those protections, they're not paying. They're like, you said you had it. So let's think about that. Insurance company hate paying ransom. Assessing networks and denying renewals, they hate that too, but they have to do it. So once you've had your renewal denied, it becomes a lot harder to get approved, because now you got denied the first time. Well, let's make sure we do our due diligence. So how do they assess your network? Well, it's a self-assessment questionnaire. They rely on you to know what's happening. You're responsible at the end of the day. They're asking questions to understand what you have in place. These questions are getting harder, and we get this a lot. We have a lot of clients sending us that Excel spreadsheet saying, hey, can you fill this out for me? You guys do everything, right? We do with the standard. We do if you're under compliance, then we have to discuss this and what is included and what's not included. So we fill it out correctly. And sometimes we say no to some of these answers. That's when questions come up. Like, why is it no? Well, because you don't have Threat Locker. Just giving you some love back there, Mario. Okay, so here's 5 simple questions tests I'm gonna give you guys to understand if you're able to answer those, you'll know if you qualify or not. I'm gonna simplify it. 5 question tests. Number 1, do you have MFA, multi-factor authentication, for email and sensitive information? In other words, you get a code that allows you to log in to get that data. 2, do you have backup? And are you sure they're working? Do you know? Do you have up-to-date active antivirus installed on all machines? What type of antivirus? Do you know what it does? Does it actually do the work? Did you test it? Because you'd be surprised. Some antivirus are there. I can see it blinking right there, but we put a malicious payload through the network and it does nothing. It looks good, but does nothing. Do you have a written documented breach response plan? And most importantly, do you have up-to-date and active firewall technology? So how do you check if you have those by yourself? Do you go to your IT provider and say, hey, do we have this? Well, I'm going to give you the answers so that you know, because at the end of the day, the owner is responsible for what's happening in their company. So you need to be aware of that. So do you have MFA? Well, first, if you have MFA set up, guess what? Are you prompted? Did you get a prompt? So when you log into your email, you have to put in a code. When you log into your network remotely, do you have to put in a code? If you don't have it. As simple as that. We don't have to guess if you have it or not. If you don't get prompted, you don't have it. 2, do you have backup? And are you sure they're working? So backups are a little harder, right? The best way to know that you have a good backup is to actually test them and say, hey, I've lost this file. Can you restore it for me? And that's one way to find out if you have it. So the only way really is to recommend at least once per quarter to test your backup to make sure that it's working properly. Next is, do you have up-to-date active antivirus? Okay, now that you checked off a multi-factor authentication, and let's talk about backup and antivirus and how do you test that? The easiest way is to go down to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, hover over each of the little icon, looking for something that basically says antivirus or advanced threat protection or endpoint protection, or so you make sure you have it. As an owner, just make sure you have it. So 20% of networks have missing antivirus, and another big percentage have antivirus that's not updated, and some have it as standard, so it doesn't stop some more advanced malicious issues that may come up in hacks. Do you have a written documented breach response plan? As the owner, you're responsible for it. You should have a plan. It's a piece of paper, and it has the plan laid out. So make sure that you have that. And then last but not least, do you have an up-to-date active firewall? It's easy to find out because if you have an active firewall, you're paying for it yearly. If you're not, you don't. So did you get a bill? And if you paid it, you have it. If you didn't, guess what? It's not up to date. And if it's not up to date, it's not doing 100% of the work. And that's very important. So that's how you find out. 5 easy way to think about for yourself and say, hey, maybe we need help here. Maybe I'm not completely polished up here. You are responsible for the answers. Avoid having your claim denied, really, because you're responsible for that. So avoid becoming a victim. You can avoid being a victim altogether if you have the correct tools to protect your network. If you have the correct tools to protect your network is very important. You might be thinking, I don't have to invest in cybersecurity tools because I have insurance. We just talked about the importance of insurance. Well, you have health insurance, right? I hope so. Well, would you jeopardize your health just because you have insurance? I hope not. Would you go in a room that has radioactive materials just because you have insurance? You're impenetrable? No. And that's not a word, by the way, but I just realized it. Do what I can. No, that would be risky, right? It could make you very, very sick for a very long time. Well, guess what? A data breach or ransomware will make your business very, very sick for a very, very long time. And we see it on a daily basis. And we help people, because that's what we do is really help people through bad times. So remember that small accounting firm, well, it took them 2 years to recover. So you might be thinking, I don't have any data that hackers want. I'm small. I don't keep anything on-prem. We hear that all the time. I have nothing here. That accounting firm, they had nothing there either. Everything was in the cloud. Hackers look for hosts to infect other companies. You may not have data they want, but you have people that have data they want. Well, then if I just have your contact list, and your email address, I'm going to infect everybody you know. Hackers look for any small vulnerabilities to spread their poison. Even if you don't have any data that the hackers want, they want something that you have, and everybody's under attack. And they don't know that when they first get started. So it's a wide sweeping, I'm gonna go after all these companies. If I got an IP or an email or whatever it may be, I was able to grab something, they go after it. Imagine how you feel if a hacker used your email and your contact list to send ransomware viruses to all your friends and families and business contacts that you have. Imagine how you would feel about that. Risky, and most importantly, it would be, I would say, embarrassing. You know, didn't do the right thing. Could have, would have, should have. Well, you guys are here today, so I'm going to show you what to do. 93% of security breaches are preventable. I'm going to show you how, but before I do that, let me introduce you to Ed. The cliffhanger, if you will.
It's a big shoes to fill. Great presentation, but it's also the first time I've ever been told I have to make a presentation about insurance. Exciting. So this is going to be a new challenge for me. Want to talk to you a little bit about actual cyber liability insurance. It's what I've spent most of the last decade specializing in terms of the insurance that I sell to my clients. I work for a company called GenCap. We're a wholesale broker. We're local here. We're in the Ellicott Square building, downtown Buffalo. Today, want to talk a little bit about what is a data breach in insurance terms and how can a cyber liability policy help you. We're going to assess some common misconceptions about cyber and some small businesses. We've already heard some of that from Ikram's presentation about whether or not your business needs a cyber policy. Something that's new and I think worth touching on is how do you know what is the best cyber product for your business? And then the future. What can we expect in the future of this industry? We've heard already that cyber policies aren't exactly the creme de la creme for insurance companies. They typically are losing money on it. So what can we expect in terms of not only what we need to protect you against, but from an insurance perspective? So in insurance terms, what is a data breach? We hear this a lot. This is a definition that really changes on a regular basis because it's generally speaking, Social Security account, financial records, driver's licenses, but there are venues here in the United States. There are now, we operate in insurance. We always like to say we operate in 50 individual small little countries because every state has their own rules. So that could mean that perhaps the email addresses you collect from your clients could actually be considered a piece of private information. So that is a definition that is always evolving, and it's going to continue to, really until I think on a federal level, we get some kind of federal legislation kind of saying this is what is considered private information. This is going to continue to evolve, and as businesses continue to evolve and technology has really facilitated us to branch out from just our neighborhoods that we live and work in, that's going to be a real challenge for businesses as we continue to grow. Last year in 2022, 422.14 million individuals were impacted by a data breach. That means your personal information taken in a breach you may not know about. How many people here got a letter in the mail within the last 3 years saying that you were part of a data breach or one of our vendors we use had told us, right? The reality is that if you're a person, your data is already on the dark web. It's there. So as a business and as an individual, all you can really do is be aware of that and be on the lookout for what we've kind of heard, some of those business email compromises, things of that nature. So it's a pretty big number of individuals, right? So cyber liability. What is cyber liability really? How many people has ever Googled what is cyber insurance? If you have, this might look or sound extremely familiar because this is the first thing that pops up on Google when you Google cyber insurance. And this is the definition that Wikipedia has right up there. And how many people think that this sounds good? I put this on here because I thought that this was a really terrible, terrible definition of cyber liability. Because what it's basically telling you is that we're only protecting your business from an internet-based risk. And I don't even know what that is. Because at the end of the day, we're protecting you not only from external factors. So you've got attackers from the outside, you've got those hackers, you could be part of a much larger breach elsewhere, and you might just be kind of caught up in something much larger than you. But we do protect businesses and cyber liability to many other things, and that could be internal, rogue employees. It's renewal time. It's raise time. Perhaps business is tight and somebody doesn't get the raise they wanted, so they have access to confidential information, and that information vanishes. I have no end to claims examples I could give you about that. Thumb drives. How many people whose businesses here have any type of thumb drive that is local inside your office? That thumb drive goes missing. You don't know what's on that thumb drive. You don't know if that had personal information. Does that constitute a data breach? If we don't know where it is and who has it, it may very well be a reportable event. Laptops. How many businesses use laptops? That's a mobile device. Rushing home from work, you want to get home to get the kids' soccer game, you put the laptop on the passenger seat, you have to stop and get gas because you're going to run out. You run in to get yourself a bottle of water because it's hot out. You come out, that laptop is gone. Is that a data breach? All depends. So cyber has really become a much more all-encompassing product. And the thing that I love the most about the product is, and I've said this to my clients, it's the only product that I can sell you with the word liability where 90% of the costs do not have to be triggered by a lawsuit, right? How many people have either had a conversation about cyber liability and have had that conversation, I'm too small, nobody's going to sue me if I have a data breach. With modern cyber policies, most of the coverage is there for you only when you need it. You don't need any external triggers to come in and say, hey, I think your business has an issue because my credit card has fraud on it. Now I'm gonna hold you responsible for it. Does size matter? This comes up all the time. How many people think that as a small business, you're not a target? We've already heard what some of the statistics are, right? What if I told you 42% of claims last year, targets, were small businesses? 42%. So that means the other percentage of that is split up between the mega corporations and the larger corporations. Small, medium businesses accounted for 42% of all data breaches last year. That's a big number. And generally, small businesses, as a small business, you can't really compete with the mega corporations, right? Because you don't have the infinite pool of resources that you can pull from. Last year in 2022, 23.7% of attacks were a phishing, spear phishing, or a vishing attack. You've probably heard of phishing. Spear phishing, very similar, more of a targeted attack against an individual, maybe a key person in an organization. Vishing is sort of a new one that's popping up, where it's using voice to try to glean information. So phone calls that might come in to a low-level employee purporting to be somebody from HR who you've never met before, or very well could just honestly be another computer that's talking to you, and it sounds very human-like, and you don't realize that you're actually talking into something that's recording everything you say. 18.6, we talked about data breaches not having to be internet-based. Pure data breach. I mean, a computer goes missing, a thumb drive goes missing, somebody sends an email with a spreadsheet of client information to the wrong email address. We're all human. That type of stuff happens on a day-to-day basis. 16.5% malware attack. 14.8, denial of service attack. This is an increasing area that we're seeing. As more of our businesses have moved to cloud environments, a lot of those cloud environments do run off of some much larger environments. Denial of service is a big one. I don't know, I just read this article the other day, but if there's anybody here who has kids that are gamers or anything like that, one of the big companies just had a massive denial of service attack that took down all their platforms for like 48 hours. Nobody could play the games or anything like that. So they didn't really suffer any losses, but you can see it's an increasing area of concern. Ransomware attacks. We already talked a little bit about those. Certainly an area of concern, and we've seen some of the costs. It's getting more and more expensive. And then other cyber attacks. So this is just kind of anything that we didn't really touch on, kind of in this kind of a catch-all area. In 2022, the average cost of a data breach, you can see here from 2016 all the way up to present day today. This is the total cost. This isn't just one part of it. This is at the end of the day, after everything is all said and done and the dust is settled, the total costs, 4.35 million. Now, Ikram did touch on the fact that these numbers are going to be boosted by some of the larger organizations that are getting hit. But nonetheless, on an average basis, if we look around the room here, it stands to reason that if all of us were here from different companies, somebody who gets hit with a data breach is going to end up costing 4.35 million total. 81% of attack victims reported being attacked again in the same calendar year. Remember I made that comment about the dark web, all of our information's on there? The bad guys talk to each other. So if they hit you once, they're going to go on there and they're going to say, hey, there's a soft target. You know what? Chances are you're going to be attacked again. Whether it was a phishing attack or ransomware attack, they're going to try you again. And that's really where, if you've had an event, having that cyber policy, but also working with a qualified vendor to really make sure you're now, resilient to it again in the future is critical. This one I thought was a really interesting statistic I wanted to talk about. 60% of businesses reported that they had to increase their consumer price in order to cope with the financial fallout from a breach. I thought that was fascinating to me because in the economy we're in and the hyper-competitive nature of a lot of our fields, if you think about that, if you got hit with a data breach and you had to increase your consumer prices by even just 15 to 25%, do you think you'd be able to retain all your relationships and all of your clients? Or do you think that there would be attrition to your competitors who didn't have that data breach, who now don't have to deal with that? To really see how it has a trickle-down effect. This is something that's become more and more near and dear to my heart because when I started in cyber insurance, we were kind of treating everybody the same. Everybody was the same risk. We sold the same products to the same people. But the reality is that that's not all true. In order for you to really determine what's best for you, you have to understand your exposures. We talked about the self-assessment. We talked about speaking with in-house IT and really knowing what's at risk. Consult with a qualified service provider such as MVP. Talk to a qualified insurance agent or risk manager, right? We could talk to you about your network environment, but at the end of the day, you really do have to talk to a qualified insurance professional who can know the market and know what product is going to fit best for you. Seek out reputable sources that understands the nuance of different coverages. This is one that I harp on with people I work with. There are no two cyber policies that are identical. If I brought all my top carriers in here and lined them up against this wall, they'd all look at you and they'd say, I write cyber liability. And I'd excuse them and I would tell you that everything they just told you is true, but that every single one of them writes a very, very different product. And then in the event of a breach, you will have a very different experience with each and every one of them. So it's really understanding your business and your exposures and giving you something that is tailored to what you do. Here's one that's kind of a new one. And we were chatting, Ikram and I were chatting about this before we got started here. You really do have to keep an eye on the future. You have to make sure that whatever product you may have, if you have a cyber policy today, or if you're thinking about applying for one today, you really do have to keep an eye on that and be very suspicious of products that you buy today that don't change for 3 to 5 years, like at all. Because what we're talking about here is an ever-evolving threat, right? I mean, the good guys that, we're here trying to help your business, but we are sometimes outmanned and outnumbered by a whole group of individuals who have resources and they're looking for the next big thing. We talked about antivirus. If you're a company or you're a person who relies on antivirus alone, the problem with most antivirus products, and they're getting better, is that they really only are as good as what we know about. It's the stuff that we don't know about that we should really be keeping us up at night. Quick little history lesson, and this is going to be kind of like closing up my part of this. Who knows who this guy is? I was waiting for somebody to ask if it was me when I started my insurance career 10 years ago. Anybody?
Turing.
Thank you. That's Alan Turing. Why do you think that I would put him in a presentation like this? What if I told you that I promise you on probably a weekly basis, you interact with Alan Turing today? How many of you have ever dealt with that? This is the good one, by the way. The worst one is that one that you got to type the letters out, and we always get it wrong at least once, right?
Yeah.
And then you get it wrong a second time, and then you start questioning yourself, like, am I in the Matrix here? Am I really a computer and I don't realize it? Alan Turing came up with something that he called the imitation game. And it was a way for humans to tell a computer apart from another human. Now, we've already heard about artificial intelligence, right? And that really is the next kind of frontier, not only as human evolution, but from a business perspective. AI has a lot of potential to help us grow our businesses. I mean, imagine a future where you could have an automated AI attendant that could potentially, field calls and get calls to the right person quickly and efficiently. The problem is, it's also being used by the bad guys. It's widely believed right now that artificial intelligence, generative AI, ChatGPT, I'm sure we've all heard ChatGPT, widely believed that right now artificial intelligence is roughly 6 to 9 years away from being able to reliably pass the Turing test. And that's pretty scary, because that means you're going to have artificial intelligence able to draft emails that'll sound just like you, potentially make phone calls that sound very real. And so as the humans, how will you know if you're talking to a machine or a person? Obviously, AI is going to be a huge, huge weapon for us to fight back, but we have to be aware of the fact that it's going to be used against us. And AI right now is the next big evolution for humans. And it's a scary one for cyber insurance, because if you kind of go back to that comment I made, keep an eye on your product and make sure it's evolving. In 5 to 6 years, we could probably come back and be having this conversation very differently. And it's likely going to be because of artificial intelligence and kind of how it has been kind of accelerating, certain areas of attack. I do have a slide for questions. You want to, does anybody have any questions of anything I did? I saw there was some foil over there. If you guys want to have us some foil hats made, we can do that. But any questions from anybody about like the actual cyber insurance side of it?
What would the cost be for a policy for my company?
So it's a great question. It's a difficult question to answer because it is a very, I don't want to use the term intimate, but it's really going to be dependent upon your company. And that's going to be depending on what industry you're in. It's going to depend on a lot of what Ikram talked about. What's your current security posture? Are you somebody who has really strong security or not? I think at the end of the day, that's really where you want to kind of have that conversation with somebody where we can kind of look at it and say, okay, when we've taken everything from a holistic approach, what's the security? What risk class are you in terms of, are you a healthcare organization? I mean, healthcare breaches are a lot more expensive than, a small accounting firm that we heard about. So really, I would say it's very difficult to kind of answer that question. Really, what you want to have a good conversation with one of, an insurance professional or somebody else that maybe has a policy in a similar business class of yours. But just know that you very rarely would be able to answer that question. Anybody who says they can is probably just, we're all salespeople, so probably not being totally truthful with you. So the other thing I'll mention too, on cyber policies, in the weird chance that you could ever find 2 cyber policies that are absolutely identical. I've never found it, but if you did, and you would look at it and say, okay, this policy is $3,000 and this policy is $4,500, but they're identical, you'd probably ask yourself, well, what the heck am I getting with one versus the other? I think it's also important to understand with cyber policies, a lot of these carriers are investing heavily in their own breach response teams. So I think that that's really one of those things I would caution you on. Don't just dismiss the premium and say it's the exact same thing. It says cyber liability, that's what I want. Really have the conversation, because some companies are investing heavily in the initial response that they're going to provide to you. And that I think cannot be discounted. Companies that are not investing heavily in that and are really just reactionary in our industry are kind of becoming the dinosaurs a little bit. More and more we're seeing our partners really trying to be proactive and jumping on calls, whether it be with you or with your IT rep, to really try to get these problems solved, where like in ECMC, If we could have gotten it fixed at 40,000, it would have been a very different news story than it is today. So, great question.
I have 2 questions from online.
Yeah.
One is application endpoint protection. What does that refer to?
Application endpoint protection?
Yeah.
Okay, I can answer that.
Yeah.
So we talked about application endpoint protection is protecting the applications that you have. What is it? Oh, okay, sorry.
Protecting the applications you have on your endpoint, your machine. And we talked about an application allow listing solution. So Threat Locker is here. Feel free to talk to them. This is a zero trust application, endpoint security, if you will. And the idea is we put a tool on a machine. That tool learns what that user is going to use and produces a list of every application that user used. Remember, we're trying to protect data, but every single piece of data got produced on an application, right? Whether being Word, Excel, or an ERP or EHR system. Okay, so in that case, what if we can tell the computer not to run anything that we didn't approve? So we get that list and we mark it off. This application is approved, this application is approved. I don't know what this is. I don't want this to run again. And that's it. We put it in protect mode. At that point, if you clicked on something you're not supposed to click, if somebody sends you something you're not supposed to get and you actually activated it, it won't run because an application security system will stop it because it hasn't been approved already. So 99% of viruses are applications. If we're able to stop all those without worrying about the definition, right? Can an endpoint protection tool really do the job? And that's what that is. I hope that answered the questions. If they have another one.
There is one more question.
Sure.
Can you guys talk about third-party breach coverage?
Yeah, so third party in the sense of a third party has had a breach and they're now reporting to you. Great question. Absolutely is something that could trigger one of our policies. So, I mean, we're all business partners here, and even take me for an example and my clients. If the company I work for has a data breach, it's always important when you are looking at this to ask yourself who is whose client in a relationship, right? So I've collected a lot of data. Let's just say I'm underwriting your business. I collect a lot of data about your company through your agent. My systems are breached. Now I have to report to that, but you are not my client. Your agent is my client. So now I've got to turn around and I've got to figure out when that breach occurred, what data did that individual get to, and now I have to now send out notification to those individuals and say, hey, just so you know, we had a breach. We're not really sure anything's going to come of it, but you need to be made aware of it. That's now what we're talking about with that third-party breach, because now you have to act on that. You now have to assess, well, how much data did I share with this individual? What data did I share with this individual? And what are my regulatory steps that I need to take? And that's really where a cyber policy can come into play, because you can talk to a breach coach is what we call them in insurance, which is a fancy term. It's a lawyer who specializes in that. And they can look at a situation and they could say, yeah, you probably have a notifiable event. You need to take these next steps. Or they can look at it and say, you don't have to notify anybody. So great question. And it's absolutely something, another value of kind of having, I always ask my clients sometimes, like if you're a small business, what does it cost to put a lawyer on retainer if you needed them? That's really oftentimes the insurance premiums are going to be pretty much right around there anyways, if not less. One of the values of buying a policy. So thank you for the question. Any other questions? Real quick, my last slide, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Emily Floss Murphy for having me out and Ikram for having me out. It was a pleasure to speak with you guys. I know you have a few slides left over. I'll hang out for a little bit afterwards if everybody has any questions, but thank you so much for your time today.
Okay, that was great. Thanks, Ed. I hope you guys found it beneficial. And if you have questions later, please let us know. But we talked about how to avoid being a victim, right? All right, so we talked about inspecting your network. So just make sure someone is inspecting your network no less than every 90 days. Have someone, a third party, something you've never thought of. I said I was going to mention that. A third party mini network pen test with cyber insurance analysis. Okay, what does that mean? So our security team and our partner have built a most comprehensive cyber insurance analysis available. We combined 13 different Excel spreadsheets, took the best out of all of them, and made it into one cybersecurity insurance assessment, a big one. And we can go through that with you and to see where you stand. But in order to get that detail, here's what you could do. Get a free third-party mini network pen test with cyber insurance analysis. We could do that for you. And a lot of people, when we ask them to, hey, well, we're a third party, we don't manage your IT, or if we do manage your IT, we look at it from a third party. We use a partner called Galactic Advisor that actually runs security on the networks that we manage as a third party, because, you know, we don't want to hold ourselves, we hold ourselves to a very high standard, but somebody else has a different eye and will be very critical on what we do. So we want that eye. We want somebody to know what we're doing and to evaluate it. And the only way to do it is to run a scan on your network. Well, a lot of people get scared when we say run a scan. Somebody else is going to find out that you're running a scan. Is my IT provider going to be mad that now I got a third party to look at it? They should be happy if they're doing their job, because it's going to prove to you that they're doing their job. And some people say, I'm not the right person. I mean, I'm the owner, but I don't manage that. So are you the right person for this? Well, if you think it's not your job, you're wrong. It is. Your job is to protect your company, period. And we're offering a third-party risk assessment on your environment to let you know if you have holes in your security or not, and what those holes are. You know, are you completely protected? I mean, you could be thinking, I'm already protected. I have someone that does this. And then you point at Ray. Are you absolutely sure you're completely protected from ransomware and hackers? If you'd love to be able to answer yes and no, let us run a scan. You know, that won't cost you anything. And people would say, well, you're right. Do I need to get my IT department involved? Because now, or my IT person, because now they're going to wonder, I don't trust them. And people are afraid of that optic. But really, at the end of the day, you know what? We will not install anything on your network. We are pretending to be a hacker. So what we'll do is basically try to see where your vulnerability and where your weakest part is on your network. We will not need your admin credentials to run the scan. You know, a lot of people come in and say, give me your username and password so I can run a scan. Well, a hacker doesn't have that. We're going to pretend we're a hacker. Our tool that we send you a link on, basically we will, send you a link, and we recommend you send it to 5 key employees in your company. The person that has HR, the person that manages your money and logs into your bank accounts, anybody that's important that has data that you think has access to data, not only have data on their machine, but have access to data, send them that link. They're going to click run on the link, and they're going to continue using their machine like they usually do. The machine is going to pretend to be a hacker. It's going to look at if it can jump from one computer to the other. Can it get the data? What kind of data can it get? Can it crack your password? What kind of vulnerabilities are you under? And we're not talking about a vulnerability assessment. This is a mini pen test pretending to be a hacker to give you the data out of your network to tell you where the holes are. It's important to know. And then we'll meet with you and go through a confidential report. So you may ask yourself, you know, what's the catch? Well, it's a little one. We can't do it for everybody. So we have a limit of 10. And we have a lot more people here, so just be aware. And then number 2, we usually charge for those assessments, but we're buying 10 and supplying them. So feel free to make sure that if you're interested, sign up as soon as possible. And this is how you're going to sign up. You're here right now. Scan it. The people online, scan it. The first 10 get the assessment. We'll send you a link, and then we'll sit with you and go through it. Any questions?
Peter, I just want to mention that you and I met for the first time we ran that vulnerability test in my business, and it was idle. We've been working with you ever since. So I
appreciate that. And I want to say thank you to Joe. So Emmerling was one of our first clients and been a partner of ours for a long time. And then Joe Floss and Emmerling kind of combined forces, and now they own this big conglomerate, if you will. And if you need insurance, it's a company we recommend across the board. So Joe, thanks for the time today, and thanks for helping us put this together. He did help us with everything that you guys see. So without you, this wasn't going to be able to be possible, but I appreciate that. And let us scan your network. Let us tell you where the issues are, and then let us help you patch those problems. That's it. If you guys don't have any other questions, yes, go ahead.
If somebody does get a ransomware thing on a computer.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, call.
Well, I know, but should we just shut the computer down? Should we?
Ideally, the first thing I would do is, first of all, unplug the computer, make sure it's, yeah, and then call us. And let us go from there and see what's happening. It's usually, if you got a ransomware, it's really on your server too. It's gonna be a bigger issue. Because not only is your machine gonna be infected, but if the machine has access to anything else, it's just, they're gonna bounce from one to the other. And that's what we're gonna do to test. So we're gonna send you a link, and we're gonna see how far across the network we can get and what kind of data can we get. Is your firewall protecting you enough? Because we're gonna send a malicious payload through it. Did it stop it? Did your antivirus stop any password cracking attempts? Are you able to, the tools that you already have, is it good enough to protect your network? And where the holes are, and how can we help you to patch those holes? So find out. We'll get you a third-party mini pen test, and we'll sit with you, and we'll go through the insurance analysis that we put together and help you get the best policy, but most importantly for me, protect your network properly. All right? Any other questions?
Can I just real quick?
Yes.
I want to touch on that question from our perspective. Everything he said 100%. Last thing you want to do if you have a cyber policy is engage with the attacker. Do not negotiate on your own behalf. After you've unplugged it, you've talked to everybody, you've filed the claim. That's critically important because you could actually jeopardize our position in the insurance perspective in terms of being able to, if needed, negotiate with the attacker on your behalf and actually get it for less. But oftentimes, if we have gotten to a point where you have had an event that's unrecoverable, so backups were not sufficient, the attacker's inside the system, they've been inside the system, they've actually got your backups. A lot of the carriers we work with, their breach response teams actually do have copies of some of the decryption tools. So we can get in and we can see like, okay, we don't have that decryption tool, and these guys are notorious for, we pay them and they don't give us your data back. So you know what, we're just going to ignore them and tell them to go pound salt, and we're going to unfortunately have a really bad event, or they may already have that tool. So I just wanted to add that. It was a great question. Definitely act as quickly as you possibly can, but do not engage with the attacker because you could potentially jeopardize your position in the event that you do need to file a claim with the carrier.
I'll add one more thing. We make sure to have a breach response plan so we could just follow those steps. So that way, that question doesn't come up. What will happen if? That's the plan that will help you put together. So that's the idea here. Let us test you, third party, independent, and then let us help you put together the plan that you need to move forward. I hope you guys had fun. I hope the food was delicious. Thank you for your time. I see some cookies up here, so I'm going to be busy, and I appreciate your time today, and thanks for everything.